shall we begin?
And here we go.
Let the games begin.
All right.
A new age has begun. An age of freedom.
This is Sparta!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
You had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Get to the chopper!
This is going to be quite the ride.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. This is, of course, the Movie Pit Podcast, where we talk about all of the big breaking movie news items of the week. We also talk about, well, that's pretty much it right now because we're in quarantine. This is usually the part where I would say we also talk about the trailers that came out this week and the movies coming out in theaters, but none of that stuff's happening. So, just movie news. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast this week. I want to get right to it because we have a crap ton of movie news. It feels now like a real Movie Pit podcast. Also, one of the biggest movie news items to come out of this whole quarantine came out this week, and I want to get to it. But before we get to all that, I do want to talk about some movie news items that came out after the podcast came out last week. So we're going to start off with those. The director of Call Me By Your Name. I'm not going to mention his name because every time I do, I always mispronounce it. But his adaptation of the Lord of the Flies movie has found its writer. He's been working, we talked about this on the podcast before, but he's been working on a adaptation of Lord of the Flies. They found a writer in Patrick Ness, the writer of A Monster Calls and Chaos Walking, both of which he came to write the adaptations for. The movie is based, of course, off the classic 1954 novel by William Golding that follows a group of young boys stranded on a deserted island, a jungle island, and must survive the island, eventually breaking into two groups, each with their own set of rules and their way of life. It is a very good book if you have not read it. It's one of those, I'm pretty sure most people have read it. I think it may have been, I think when I was in school, it was probably required reading. I can't remember. But the adaptation of Lord of the Flies has been kicking around over at Warner Brothers for some time now. At one point, they were going to do a female version of the movie, and that was getting worked on for a long time, and the studio decided to go the traditional route and stick with the all male version. And the movie is supposedly going to be very close to the source material. So if you've read the book, you kind of know where that's going, and that should be interesting to see in today's world. But there you go. And the next movie news item that came out after the podcast went up last week was that Disney and Marvel decided to move two of their big movies, and that is, of course, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Thor, Love and Thunder. The Doctor Strange sequel was already moved before, earlier this year, especially when this quarantine started going around, to November 5th of next year. That will now officially come out again. It's been moved again. Now will come out on March 25th, 2022, meaning that the studio was probably not confident with the starting production in June like they had planned, because everything's still going to be shut down. And I think they're pretty much still on the drawing board. There's not really too much about the movie that we know. Of course, Sam Raimi will be directing the movie. Benedict Cumberbatch will be reprising his role as the good doctor himself, Doctor Strange. Benedict Wong will supposedly reprise his role as Wong in the movie, and Chiwetel Ejiofor is, I guess, reportedly coming back as well as Baron Mordo. Elizabeth Olsen is also set to join the fun. She will be reprising her role as Wanda. And the first film director, Scott Derrickson, who left under creative differences, will come back, and he will remain as an executive producer on the movie. As for Thor, Love and Thunder, that's actually been moved up, not moved down or delayed. Its February 18th, 2022 release will now be a release of February 11th, 2022, a small but happy move, to which writer and director Taika Waititi made fun of it, saying that he was on vacation on Twitter, so that's kind of funny. Where was I? I almost said Scott Derrickson again. Chris Hemsworth will return as Thor. Tessa Thompson will return as Valkyrie. Christian Bale will be joining the cast. He will be playing an unknown role, but apparently he will be playing the villain. So there is that. Also, Natalie Portman will return as Jane Foster and is expected to take the mantle of Thor in the movie. So that announcement felt like so long ago. But here we are. And finally, Sony Pictures moves a lot more movies, including Uncharted again, and some of the Spider-Man movies. So the first one we're going to talk about is the long in development Uncharted movie that has been plagued with problems from the start. That has been moved, surprisingly, it has been moved up, not delayed any longer. The movie was supposed to come out in October of next year. That will now not happen, but it will come out sooner somehow, apparently. It will now come out on July 16th, 2021. That's a very rare move, but it's a very ambitious move by Sony, but we'll see if that works out. Tom Holland will star as Nathan Drake, a treasure hunter, and Antonio Banderas will be playing an unknown role. Mark Wahlberg is also in the movie. He will be playing Sully. Ruben Fleischer, the director of the Zombieland movies and Venom, will be directing this movie for Sony. Other moves include their animated films like Connected, which now comes out on October 23rd, Vivo, which will come out next year on June 4th, and Hotel Transylvania 4, apparently they're making a fourth one, will now come out on August 6th. That was originally supposed to set out, they actually moved that up. That was supposed to originally come out in December of next year, but I guess they're confident enough to move that up. The drama Fatherhood will now come out on April 2nd. Their action comedy, The Man from Toronto, with Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson. They have also just added Kaylee Coco from The Big Bang Theory. That will now open next year in September. That was originally supposed to come out this year in November, but obviously they haven't even started filming yet, so there is that. The sequel to Escape Room was also set for December of this year. That will now come out in January of next year, so they only moved that a month. And the adaptation of The Nightingale that was going to reunite the Dakota sisters, Elle Fanning and Dakota Fanning, that has been moved completely from the release schedule. That was supposed to come out this year on Christmas, but obviously that is no longer the case. Finally, the big one, the third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie and the sequel, the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, those also got moved around. The third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie was set to come out on July 16th, 2021. That will now come out on November of next year, November 5th, while the sequel for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that will now come out on October 7th of 2022. That was originally set for April 8th, 2022, but then, again, now to October. So, there you go. Yeah, that's it. That's all the movie news items that came out after the podcast came out last week. Let's move forward to this week's podcast. We do have some quickfire movie news items. I haven't done quickfire in a while, but like I mentioned, there's a lot of movie news this week, so it almost feels like a real podcast. This one, I just wanted to mention this one. I have nothing to say about this one other than the fact that it happened. So despite Hollywood shutting down, and pretty much all productions shutting down on any movie or TV series that is in the works, one movie apparently didn't. A World War II fantasy horror movie called War Hunt finished filming after it continued filming during the COVID-19 pandemic. That movie was shot in the capital of Latvia, where they were allowed to continue working by abiding the government guidelines. The movie stars Mickey Rourke, Jackson Rothbone, and Robert Kepner as an elite squad of American soldiers on a secret mission during World War II. They become trapped behind enemy lines in Germany's Black Forest. The men are then confronted by a coven of witches. I just when I read the movie, when I read it, I was like, okay, yeah, okay, sure, why not? So there you go. It has been revealed. This is the next movie news item. It has been revealed that Daft Punk will be scoring Dario Argento's next film, Black Glasses. That's at least the American title. There's, of course, a different title. Argento confirmed the news himself, speaking with an interview, saying that the group reached out after finding out he was directing a new film, and they were a huge fan of his. So there you go. It also sounds like the movie will be a crime movie, at least according to Argento's explanation of the movie in the interview. Another move for the releases, the semi-autobiographical, I can't say that word apparently, comedy about Pete Davidson's life, directed by Judd Apatow, will skip its theater run and join the trend of other films to be released on video on demand, which is a big thing this week. We'll talk about that later. The King of Staten Island, that's the name of the movie, will hit VOD on June 12th, a week before it was scheduled to hit theaters. The movie was co-written by Apatow as well, and it is loosely based off Davidson's upbringing in New York. That will star Pete Davidson. He does have a role in the movie. Marisa Tomei's in there. Judd Apatow's daughter, Maud, Apatow is in there, and Bill Burr also appear in the movie. The next quickfire movie news item, Karen Gillan is set to star in the satirical sci-fi thriller Duel, where she stars as a woman who receives a terminal diagnosis and opts for a cloning procedure to ease her loss on her friends and family. When she makes a miraculous recovery, her attempts to have her clones decommissioned fail and lead to a court-mandated duel to the death. The movie is written and directed by Riley Stearns, who recently directed The Art of Self-Defense with Jesse Eisenberg, if you all saw that movie. Jesse Eisenberg will also co-star in this movie along with Aaron Paul. No word yet, of course, on when that will start filming, but there you go. John Wick, Deadpool 2, and Hobbs & Shaw director David Leitch is set to produce the amnesia-themed movie Fast and Loose for XTX Entertainment with his 87 North partner Kelly McCormick. The movie is written by the Ho brothers, John and Eric, who wrote The Meg, the Jason Statham giant shark movie, and follows a man who wakes up in Tijuana after being left for dead with absolutely no memory, as he follows a string of clues to uncover his identity as he discovers that he's been living two different lives on opposite sides of the law. One as a wealthy crime kingpin surrounded by beautiful women, and the other as an undercover CIA agent with little money and no family. The problem is he can't remember which one is his true identity. The search for a director is ongoing, so we'll obviously keep you updated on that. Lionsgate has hired a writer for the next Now You See Me. Yes, a Now You See Me 3 is officially happening. The studio has hired Eric Warner Singer. I can't say his name. Eric Warren Singer, which is completely different from what I was saying. He wrote American Hustle, or at least was one of the writers on American Hustle, to write the script based on an original idea. The follow-up is described as a, quote, fresh take, unquote, on the franchise that will capture the fun, magic, and spirit of the original movie, introducing new characters while at the same time providing the opportunity for the members of the original cast to reprise their roles. In case you need a reminder on who the original cast were, that was Jesse Eisenberg, Woody Harrelson, and Dave Franco. Ilsa Fisher was a part of the first movie, but she couldn't come back for the sequel, so they ended up casting someone new in Lizzie Kaplan. So we don't know which one of those two, maybe both, will appear. We'll find out if you're interested in that. And the final quickfire movie news item of the week, Amblin Partners, Steven Spielberg's production company, has tapped Wes Ball, the director of the Maze Runner movies, to direct an adaptation of the sci-fi novel The First 15 Lives of Harry August. The novel follows a man who is repeatedly born into the same life and can remember all of his past experiences. He sets out to save the world from a similar gifted rival who is willing to make any sacrifice to attain godlike knowledge and power. The novel itself has won acclaim across many of the book communities. Ball himself is also set to direct the reboot of Planet of the Apes for Disney's 20th Century Studios, although he did an interview not so long ago saying that maybe the reboot isn't necessarily a complete reboot. They're still working on it, obviously, so we'll have to wait and see on that. So there you go. That is your quick fire movie news items of the week. Let's move on to this week's movie news items, the big movie news items of the week, I should say. All right, so the first big movie news item of the week, this one's actually kind of cool. YouTube will be running a 10-day digital film festival this spring with 20 partners to stream free movies to fans at home. The film festival will be titled We Are One, a global film festival. The whole thing is being produced and organized by New York's Tribeca Enterprises and will feature the programming from 20 top films festivals, including the Tribeca Film Festival themselves, Venice Film Festival, the Berlin International Film Festival, Sundance Film Festival, the Toronto International Film Festival, and the Cannes Film Festival, along with, of course, many others. The online film festival is set to run from May 29th to June 7th this year and will be available at youtube.com/weareone. The film festival will not include any ads and will feature films, shorts, documentaries, music, comedy, and panel discussions. Right now, organizers aren't naming any specific films expected to be screened, but there will be a full schedule available in the coming weeks. Viewers will be asked to make donations for the COVID-19 relief, which YouTube and Tribeca will said they will benefit the World Health Organization and local organizations in regions globally. So that's kind of cool. The event will not replace any standalone film festivals, as some film festivals are planning to run in September or run their own digital physical programs. So this is kind of cool. I kind of like this. Amazon Prime, their Prime Video is doing something similar to this, but it seems like YouTube got the bigger selection of film festivals, which is really cool. So let's move on to the next movie news item, which is the Academy. The Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences has made several temporary changes to the Oscar ceremony, especially the eligibility of some of those movies. Maybe if there is an Oscar ceremony next year. That big change is that movies that debut on video on demand, or VOD, and streaming services will now be eligible for the Academy Awards, as long as they were scheduled for a theater run at one point. For example, the much talked about now Trolls World Tour, which we will talk about later, will be eligible for Best Animated Feature Film. The original rule, and one that they'll definitely go back to once this whole pandemic ends, because the Academy is filled with a bunch of old people, is a movie had to had a theater run in at least one theater in LA for a week. And it sounds like those movies will have to do that in theater runs for a week to be eligible again when the Oscars, or when, this whole thing goes away, hopefully soon. Elsewhere, the Academy voted to combine two sound categories, sound editing and sound mixing, and will now give out a single award for Best Sound. That will recognize both editors and mixers. That now means the show will have 23 categories instead of 24, unless they decide to add another category, which I don't see them doing anytime soon, but we'll have to wait and see. The movie's okay. Most of the time, the same movie actually ends up winning both awards. Not this past year, but it sounds, no pun intended, like the move wasn't rustling or rummaging any too many feathers, so that's nice. Other changes, this doesn't necessarily affect us unless you are a Academy voter, which good for you. It includes that voters will now get to weigh in on the preliminary nomination round for Best International Film. Prior to this, they only had the chance to vote for the film, aka the winning movie, picking the winner, essentially. Also, this will be the final year of voters to get a physical DVD screener, as they will be going digital. So all those older people, all those older viewers, which everyone kind of slightly hates now, because they all know that the Academy is filled with a bunch of older people, will now have to embrace the future. So there you go. The 93rd Academy Awards remain scheduled for Sunday, February 27th next year, but of course we'll have to wait and see if that actually happens with everything going on. So let's move on to the next move, I guess, to the next movie news item. The long-running Mad Magazine comic strip Spy vs. Spy is getting a adaptation once again. It's been in the works, not again, but it's been in the works for Hollywood for a very long time, nearly a decade apparently, from a lot of the movie news outlets that I read. And it now looks like the project is back with a director attached in Rawson Martian Thurber. The movie will be a live-action movie from Warner Brothers and Imagine Entertainment, with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer producing, which is really cool. The movie will be written by John Camps. He wrote the movie Premium Rush with Joseph Gordon-Levitt that came out, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, something like that. Maybe. The comic strip, in case you're unfamiliar, follows two rival spies, Black Spy and a White Spy, who pursue each other in a relentless and comedic fashion. They're to paint you a picture of what they look like, they wear wide-brimmed hats and dress in overcoats, and they have like pointy noses. So maybe you've probably seen them. I've seen them. I didn't even realize who they were for a while, but I've seen them before in like animated shows. There was also a female gray spy who would sometimes use the two spies to her advantage. The comic strip was created in 1961, and the characters have been featured in video games and animated TV series since their creation. Like I mentioned, if you saw a picture of them, you know exactly who they are, because you've probably seen them somewhere. Back when the project was first announced, Warner Brothers and Imagine said their approach was a physical and highly visualized action comedy, but that was when they first announced it all those years ago. Who knows if maybe that is still the same approach now. Thurber, by the way, has directed movies like Dodgeball, We're the Millers, the movies with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Central Intelligence, and Skyscraper. He was also in the middle of filming Red Notice for Netflix, which also stars Dwayne Johnson, also stars Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot. So let's move on to the next movie news item. And this, actually, for Spy vs. Spy, again, I knew who the characters were. I never realized they were a comic strip, so this is pretty cool. Hopefully Hollywood can finally get this movie made, since they've been working on it for so damn long. The next movie is our next movie news item I should say, is that Daisy Ridley, of course, the star of the new Star Wars trilogy, is in talks to star in the psychological thriller The Ice Beneath Her, which revolves around, quote, a detective and a psychological profiler who work to solve the case after a young woman is found beheaded in the home of a prominent businessman. The investigation quickly evolves into a race against time. The movie is based off the novel by Camellia Gribe, I think that's how you pronounce, or Grybe, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. It's said to be the book, I should say, is told through an unreliable narrator and is a crime thriller in the like of Gone Girl and The Girl on the Train. Plus, the movie has a writer and directors attached already, kind of bearing the lead there on the movie news outlet, and also, I guess, me also kind of reporting it. The movie will be written by Caitlin Parrish. She has one feature film to her name, and that's The View from Tall, which was an independent movie from the early 2000s. She also co-directed that as well, but she has a TV series under her belt like Under the Dome, Supergirl, and The Red Line, and it will be directed by Radio Silence, the directors from Ready or Not, which is really pretty cool. This is kind of somewhat out of their zone. I mean, they did Ready or Not, which was kind of more of a thriller, horror-esque movie, and this was, I mean, obviously finding a beheaded person can probably lead to that horror element, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like something they would end up directing, but I'm really excited for them to direct this. So that's pretty cool. Ridley, I should say, hasn't done too much since joining the Star Wars franchise. She was in Murder on the Orient Express. She also played the lead role in Ophelia, which is based off the Shakespeare play Hamlet, where she the character of Ophelia, which got a limited release and a VOD release, so not a lot of people saw that. But if you're interested in watching that, then go ahead and watch it. She will appear in the adaptation of Chaos Walking with Tom Holland that will come out eventually. But in the meantime, you can see her in the Star Wars movies. Hopefully, Ridley doesn't fall into the Star Wars lead curse, because there is not necessarily a curse, but it does seem that anyone who is the lead in a Star Wars movie doesn't really get a lot of credit. Despite him being a nerd icon, Mark Hamill didn't really have that much of a prosperous career after starring in Star Wars. Did a lot of voice work, which is fine, but when it comes to live action stuff, he didn't have that much. And of course, Hayden Christensen, who apparently has fallen off the face of the planet. Unless you're a big Hayden Christensen fan, then okay. As for Radio Silence, they recently got the job of directing the reboot of Scream, so something that I'm very looking forward toward as well, because I think they can pull that off. So there you go. All right, moving on. Ron Howard is set to direct 13 Lives, the drama based on the true story of the 2018 cave rescue with the soccer team that, riveted the world when that happened. The movie will follow the boys soccer team from Thailand who became trapped in a cave for more than 2 weeks when heavy rains partially flooded the cave, blocking their way out. Of course, all 12 of the boys were rescued along with their 25-year-old coach from a retired Thai Navy SEAL, which was really cool. It's a very uplifting story, obviously, and it riveted the world when it came out, because we were all hoping that those boys would be able to get out. So there you go. The movie will be written by William Nicholson, who of course wrote Gladiator, which is really damn cool. This is the third movie. That's right, the third movie about this rescue. John M. Chu, who directed Crazy Rich Asians, is directing a miniseries for Netflix, and the filmmakers behind the movie Free Solo are developing a movie with Universal. Nat Geo is also working on something about it too, so obviously we'll be getting a lot of different things, different perspectives from this. So there you go. This is kind of cool, but I'm more interested in the approach of this. Paramount Pictures and Hasbro's E1 are developing and working on an animated prequel to the Transformers franchise. The movie will be written by Andrew Barrier and Gabriel Ferrari, who wrote Ant-Man and the Wasp, and will be directed, surprisingly, by Josh Cooley, who directed Toy Story 4. He was also one of the writers on Inside Out, so that's really cool. That's really interesting. No word yet on what the movie will be about. Of course, the last Transformer outing that we had was Bumblebee, which itself was kind of treated like a reboot to the series. So we'll see if the prequel goes off Bumblebee or if it goes off unfortunately, of the Michael Bay movies. The movies are kind of animated anyways, so them going the full animated route will be interesting. I think it'll be kind of cool. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see about the approach of it, but I'm really interested in seeing how this turns out. So we'll have to wait and see about that, but this is really cool. All right, next up, Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick movies. He gave an update on John Wick Chapter 4. Of course, everyone was excited about the news that Keanu Reeves could basically be getting his own weekend when it was announced that The Matrix 4 and John Wick Chapter 4 would be coming out on the same weekend. Everyone lost their minds. However, as stuff started happening, it looked like that wasn't going to be the case. And because of the pandemic happening, it looks like that might not be the case at all. Reeves, of course, was in the middle of filming The Matrix 4, and the plan was to shoot John Wick Chapter 4 after The Matrix, and that's clearly not happening now. Chad Stahelski talked with Collider.com and was asked about the state of John Wick Chapter 4 and said that he's even in the dark about the release date. So the release date for both movies was originally May 21st, 2021. However, with production on hold and The Matrix 4 still needing to complete filming, there's a good chance that Keanu Reeves' day is not happening, but Stahelski remained optimistic that John Wick Chapter 4 will still come out sometime next year, just not in May. So there you go. That's a quick little update on that. I'm kind of disappointed. That would have been really cool. Of course, we would have had to choose between what movie to watch first, but obviously with everything going on, it was impossible for them to keep those dates, and that's fair enough. All right, so let's move on to the next movie news item. Disney's continuing their live-action remakes of animated films with Hercules. The movie has also has the Russo brothers, aka Joe and Anthony, aka the directors of Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, to produce the movie. They will be producing the movie, not directing it. They will just be producing it. Disney has already hired Dave Callaham to write the script. Callaham does also have a Marvel connection. He wrote the script for Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. He also had a hand in writing The Expendables, the first one at least, Zombieland, Double Tap, Doom, yes, the movie Doom, and the upcoming Wonder Woman 1984. So he's all over the place, writing-wise. The 1987 animated movie, which of course has become a fan favorite amongst many, was a musical fantasy retelling of the Hercules legend, with Tate Donovan voicing the titled hero, James Woods, of course, voicing the villain Hades, and Danny DeVito voicing Phil, which was a guide, if you will, to Hercules in the movie. The animated movie itself was reportedly not easy to make. This is something I just found out. I knew the movie was spent years in development. I didn't realize that the movie had 18 credited writers working on the story and the script, which is amazing that movie even got made. But there you go. So again, Disney obviously kind of in the business now of remaking their animated classics into live action movies. No word yet on who's going to be directing. No word yet on when or what kind of approach they will still take with it. But Hercules getting a live action remake from Disney should be interesting, to say the least, but we'll have to wait and see how that works out. I do have a bigger connection to Hercules than I did Aladdin. I think I've mentioned multiple times that I didn't really have a connection to Aladdin that much, but I watched it and I really enjoyed it. So hopefully, I do have a somewhat closer connection to Hercules. So hopefully that gets made very well. All right, let's move on to the big movie news item of the week. So the big movie news item of the week, the headline is basically this: AMC Theaters, the biggest movie theater chain in the US, will no longer play Universal Pictures movies in their theaters. And if you're asking why, it all started because of Trolls World Tour. Yes, Trolls World Tour caused the end of a partnership between AMC Theaters and Universal Pictures. So here you go. NBC Universal CEO Jeff Shell did an interview with the Wall Street Journal about the success of Trolls World Tour on their straight-to-digital release. And this is what he said. This is what sparked the outrage of AMC Theaters. Saying, quote, "The results of Trolls World Tour have exceeded our expectations and demonstrated the viability of PVOD, Premium Video On Demand. As soon as theaters reopen, we expect to release movies on both platforms." And if you're wondering how successful Trolls World Tour was, in the first 3 weeks of its release on PVOD, the movie earned around $100 million domestically, which reportedly is just shy of the first 3 weeks of the theater run of the first movie. So it's making pretty much around the same amount of money that the first movie did. And Trolls, the first one, was a massive success when it first came out, and it surprised a lot of people. So in response, AMC Theaters CEO and President Adam Aaron released an open letter to the chair, I should say, of Universal Studios, Donna Langley. And I'm going to read the whole thing. I wasn't originally going to read the whole thing because I was like, that's way too long. But it is, it deserves to be read in its entirety. So here's what he said, saying, quote, "At the time of national emergency and the coronavirus wreaking havoc on the entire world, I hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. I worry and I wish for the best, the health of all of our industry colleagues. Never in our lifetime has there been a more challenging time. Amidst a global pandemic as a backdrop, I wish we were spared from also having to address the different issue that arises from Universal actions currently underway. For 100 years, AMC Theaters has served as a strategically critical and highly profitable distribution platform for movie makers. And for all that time, the exclusivity of the theater release has been fundamental. When a movie is only in theaters," they put this in quotes, "only in theaters, consumers perceive it to be higher quality entertainment. Countless filmmakers and moviegoers believe that their creative works are best enjoyed by consumers on the big screen, and we all know that those theatrical releases indeed boost publicly positive word-of-mouth, critical acclaim, and downstream revenues. For much of the past 4.5 years, I have been in direct dialogue with Jeff Shell and Peter, I'm going to pronounce his last name, Livensol, of Universal, about the importance of a robust theatrical window to the availability of motion picture exhibitions industry." A lot of entertainment insider words here, so bear with me when I'm reading this quote. Throughout that time, AMC has expressed a willingness to consider alternatives to the current windowing strategy common in our industry, where the aim of such alternatives is to improve both studio profitability and theater operative profitability. Universal stated it only pursued a direct-to-home entertainment release of Trolls World Tour because theaters were closed and Universal was committed to a lucrative toy licensing deal. We had our doubts that this was wholly Universal's motivations, and it has been a long-standing desire by Universal to go to a home day and date. Nevertheless, we expected this action as an exception of our long-standing business practices in these unprecedented times. The radical change by Universal to the business model that currently exists between our two companies represents nothing but a downside for us and is categorically unacceptable by AMC Entertainment, the world's largest collection of movie theaters. Going forward, AMC will not license any Universal movies in any of our 1,000 theaters globally on these terms. Accordingly, we want to be absolutely clear that there is no ambiguity of any kind. AMC believes that this is the proposed action to go to the home and theaters simultaneously. AMC believes that with this proposed action to go to home and theaters simultaneously, Universal is breaking the business model and dealings between our two companies. It assumes that we will meekly accept a reshaped view of how studios and exhibitors should interact, with zero concern on Universal's part as how its actions affect us. It also presumes that Universal It also presumes, I'm starting to lose it. It also presumes that Universal, in fact, can have its cake and eat it too. That Universal film product can be released to the home and theaters at the same time without modifications to the current economic arrangements between us. It is disappointing to us that Jeff's comments as to Universal's actions and intentions have left us with no choice. Therefore, effective immediately, AMC will no longer play any Universal movies in any of our theaters in the United States, Europe, or Middle East. This policy affects any and all of Universal movies per se, goes into effect today, and as our theaters reopen, it is not some shallow or ill-considered threat. Incidentally, this policy is not aimed solely at Universal out of pique or to be punitive in any way. It also extends to any movie maker who abandons current windowing practices absent good health negotiations between us, so they as distributor and we as exhibitor both benefit, neither are hurt in such changes. Currently, with the press comment today. Universal is the only studio contemplating a wholesale change to the status quo. Hence, this immediate communication in response. I'm going to stop it right there because I'm starting to feel like I'm losing the whole quote. But basically, they're just saying the same thing. Universal didn't release a statement. A shorter statement, so I'll be able to get through it. Saying this: our goal is in releasing Trolls World Tour on PVOD was to deliver entertainment to people who are sheltering at home while movie theaters and other forms outside entertainment are unavailable. Based on an enthusiastic response to the film, we believe we made the right move. In fact, given the choice of not releasing Trolls World Tour, which would not only have prevented consumers from experiencing the movie, but also negatively impacting our partners and employees, the decision was clear. Our desire has always been to effectively deliver entertainment as wide as audience as possible. We absolutely believe in the theatrical experience, and we also made no statement to the contrary. As we stated earlier, going forward, we expect to release future films directly to theaters as well as PVOD when the distribution outlet makes sense. We look forward to having additional private conversations with our exhibition partners, but are disappointed by this seemingly coordinated attempt from AMC and NATO to confuse our position and our actions. After this, and it's a little weird because after this, Regal Theater owner Cinema World joined AMC in refusing to show Universal releases and releasing a statement echoing a lot of what AMC said, although they added this little tidbit here, which I want to read. Cineworld's policy with respect to the window is clear, well known in the industry, and as part of our commercial deal with our movie suppliers, we invest heavily in our cinemas across the globe, and this allows the movie studios to provide consumers all around the world to watch the movies to the best experiences. There is no argument that the big screen is the best way to watch a movie. Universal's choice to break our understanding and did so at the height of the COVID-19 crisis when the business is closed. More than 35,000 employees are at home, and when we do not yet have a clear date on reopening our cinemas. And it just felt like they were also just flexing and be like, no, see what you're doing to all the people who work at movie theaters? Later, though, and this is the funny part, later, Regal Cinemas themselves backed up a little, saying that they will not boycott Universal or any other movie studio as long as they respect the theatrical window. So there was that to take into consideration. Then, so all this came out on Tuesday, by the way. So on Thursday, Shell was doing an earnings call with everybody, with his investors and stuff, and he said that the theoretical releases will continue as a key component, but also continued on the PVOD train, saying this about premium video on demand. The question is, when we come out of this, what is going to be the model? I expect that consumers will return to theaters and we will be part of that. And I also expect that PVOD is going to be part of that in some way. It's not a replacement. It's going to be a complementary element where you are just going to have to see how long it takes and where it takes us. He then also said this, which I kind of think is true, and I think I heard a podcast mention this, and I think it was The Big Picture, and they said this on their latest podcast, which I kind of agree with, saying, and they kind of echoed this a little bit, and I think they kind of have pretty much gathered a lot of other people within the industry to agree kind of with this. So this is what Shell said, saying, quote, "There's no question that theatrical will someday be a central element to our business and film business. It's how people make their movies and how they expect their movies to be seen. But the flip side is the majority of our movies, whether we like it or not, are being consumed at home. It's not realistic to assume that we're not going to change. We're not going to change, that this part of the business isn't going to change like all the parts of the business are going to change." So he's basically saying that PVOD is pretty much the future of people watching movies and the future of the business, which I think if you ask some people, they're kind of true. I mean, there's not a lot of people that go out to the movies, and when they finally do watch a movie, they're either watching it on Netflix, on Hulu, on Prime Video, or iTunes, whatever. But whatever video on demand service you have, you're probably watching a movie there. And if you're not watching it, you probably would rather watch it at home instead of spending, over $20-something for a bag of popcorn and a large soda, or, you know, whatever other kind of, you know, hot food they have there, and whatever, you know, and candy. So with that, you know, Shell's kind of hitting it on the head pretty much. Okay, so that was a lot to unpack, and me messing up all the quotes wasn't probably helpful, but so let's just rewind. To summarize, AMC theaters will not be playing any Universal Picture movies because one of the heads of Universal said, you know what, this worked. What we did with Trolls World Tour worked so well and worked better than we expected that we may be doing this again. The wording that he used was not that we're going to do it. No, there's nothing stopping us. You can't stop us. We're going to do it. No, the wording he used is we expect to release movies on both formats. And then later he said we expect to release both movies on formats when the occasion calls for it. He's not going to say like, oh, we're going to release, you know, F9, Fast and Furious 9 in theaters and at home the same day. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. You're going to make, I mean, you'll probably make the same amount of money, but they're not going to do it for every movie. They said when it calls for it, and we expect, not saying that we are going to do it. He said when we expect that we're going to release movies on both formats. And just to give you an idea, like I just said, movies that fall under Universal Pictures, the Fast and the Furious movies, F9, for example, the IndieWorks Hobbs and Shaw sequel, Jurassic World Dominion, all of the movies that fall under Illumination Entertainment, like the Minions movies, the Despicable Me movies, Sing, The Secret Life of Pets, the IndieWorks Mario movie that they announced like 2 years ago that Illumination Entertainment is working on with Nintendo. The Blumhouse movies also fall into this because they are co-produced by Universal and they are pretty much released by Universal as well. So that includes the movies that are maybe done at this point, like The Final Purge and Halloween Kills and even Halloween Ends. This also potentially affects No Time to Die, the new James Bond movie, because it was co-produced by Universal, and Universal takes care of the international distribution of the Bond movies. And AMC already said that they are not going to play Universal movies in the US, in Europe, and in the Middle East. So that really affects, you know, No Time to Die in a lot of ways. It could potentially, you know, do that. Maybe MGM was like, okay, maybe we can handle the distribution ourselves. Who knows? We'll see. Do I see where AMC is coming from in all this? Sort of. I get that they need to protect themselves. I get that they need to protect their investment, and they are well within their right to do this, especially since they feel and they felt like Universal did this. When they did this, they pretty much broke their arrangement that they had. But at the same time, Universal was doing what they had to do during a pandemic. They had been promoting this, that they were going to release the movie in theaters and on video on demand before the shutdown happened. I remember I remember seeing commercials saying, see this in movie theaters and on VOD. So it wasn't a surprise that Universal was going to do this. Plus, they had already released The Hunt and The Invisible Man on VOD. Granted, those movies had small theater runs before everything was closed, but still, that showed that Universal was all in on the premium VOD release, or VOD releasing. So this wasn't really that much of a surprise. I don't know if maybe AMC was pissed off at them before then, and Trolls, of all the movies, Trolls World Tour was the straw that broke the camel's back. Plus, the movie came out on the same day it was going to come out in theaters. So parents were already ready to take their kids to go watch it. Plus, I think that parents needed something to calm their kids down from either driving them crazy or, just like their parents and like all of us, from getting cabin fever. They just needed something for their kids to watch. And Trolls World Tour was just the closest thing they can do, because they've already seen Frozen 2 on Disney Plus 1,000 times already. And they just wanted to mix it up and play something else for them. Now, if Universal had done this when there wasn't a pandemic, then yes, I would agree that AMC is in their right to do this. But theaters aren't open, and AMC has already said that they are not opening their movie theaters until new movies are available, which probably won't be until mid-July, if that, considering how everything is going. So we'll have to wait and see. Personally, I love going to the movies. I really do. I love the experience of sitting down with a bunch of other moviegoers and enjoying or hating the movie that we're watching in front of us. I look forward to it every weekend, sometimes during the week. The thing that I miss the most being stuck at home is actually going to the movies. It's not anything else. It's going to the movies. Personally, I also think this move is just a little petty because AMC had basically the knee-jerk reaction of you said what? Well then, fuck you then. That's basically what that knee-jerk, for me, that's what it felt like. But Universal probably could have worded it better, could have worded it differently, but I think it was just a little too much of a reaction from AMC, considering that we're all stuck at home. Come on, we're all stuck at home. Relax a little bit. Now, of course, more importantly, will the decision stick? That's the billion-dollar question. And I do mean billion-dollar question. I highly doubt, in my most optimistic view, which I'm not very optimistic, but in my most optimistic view, I highly doubt that AMC wants to miss out on getting all that revenue from big movies like F9, like Jurassic World Dominion, and the horror crowd for Halloween Kills. On the other hand, if the decision does stick, the box office numbers for those movies could be greatly affected because, like I mentioned earlier, and like they mentioned themselves, very proudly, AMC is one of, if not the biggest theater chain in the US. So not playing those movies in that theater chain does impact those numbers greatly. So let's hope that once the pettiness and the cabin fever dies down, that AMC and Universal can work this out, because they may not, or they obviously see it as a big issue, but AMC is just like, whatever, we're not gonna play your movies. So that kind of feels like, they don't see that as a big of a deal. But for us moviegoers, we're the ones that lose out. We're the ones that are looking forward toward that movies and maybe want to see it in an AMC. I can tell you right now, there are at least 10 to maybe close to 15 AMC theaters within a 10, maybe 15 mile radius of me. 15 AMC theaters. And there's probably maybe 3 theaters that are not AMC within that same radius of me. I go to AMC theaters all the time. I have AMC A-List. I go to an AMC theater pretty much to go watch my movies. And just because I have A-List, and just because they're pretty much the only closest movie theaters around. If I have to go to a different theater to go watch big Universal movies like F9, like Jurassic World Dominion, like any of the Blumhouse movies, like maybe potentially No Time to Die, that's a big deal. And I'm sure that's a big deal for other people, especially if you're like me, who have, again, 10 to 15 AMC theaters within a 10-mile radius of my house. 5 miles even at that. It's ridiculous. It's a bit petty. It's a knee-jerk reaction, I feel like. And they're both wrong. They're both on their own accounts probably wrong. Maybe Universal could have worded it better. Maybe Universal could have said something differently. Maybe they couldn't have not said anything at all. And AMC could have said, well, we're not playing your movies anymore. And they could have been a little less petty in their open letter of saying, well, we're the biggest theater chain available. We're not going to play your movies at all. This is a big deal. I think it's a bigger deal than... It doesn't feel like a big deal now because all the movie theater chains are obviously closed and there's nothing going on. If this happened when the theaters weren't shut down, let's say there wasn't a COVID-19 pandemic and they happened to do this when nothing was going on, they just happened to do this on a regular, then we would feel that. We would feel the cosmic shift, the cosmic shift of all of this happening. But we're not there yet because everything's shut down. We're all at home. Nothing looks like it's going to be open anytime soon. This is a big deal. And I think people in the industry see it as a big deal. I think us probably don't see it as a big deal now because, again, everything's closed. But once everything opens again, we're going to feel it. Again, if, granted, the decision sticks. Hopefully the decision doesn't stick. Hopefully, clear heads prevail. But we'll just have to wait and see on how that works out. I don't know. When I read it, my instant reaction was, this is so damn petty. Why would you do this? This is ridiculous. But at the same time, I can see Universal, they want to make their money. They want people to experience their movies, and they're a business too. They need to strive during this pandemic. So And, there's the whole other thing that that movie theaters are taking very big hits during this pandemic because everything's closed and they don't know what to do. There's the whole thing of theater chains possibly trying to get a bailout. So that probably plays into some part of AMC as well. We didn't talk about that because, there wasn't, I usually don't like to get into the big financial stuff. And once I start mentioning numbers, I think everyone kind of tunes out. But yeah, there's also that to take into consideration. So we'll see. We'll see how this works out. Obviously, I will keep you updated on this. I'm obviously keeping a very close eye on this because this is massive. This is pretty big. This is pretty huge. So, and that's it, everybody. That's all the movie news items I have for you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me on the podcast this week. Let me know what your thoughts on all of this are, because obviously this also affects you as well. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I very much appreciate it. Anything you guys need from me, links to anything that you need to follow me are down below in the description/show notes area. If you're following us on YouTube, thank you. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, be sure to drop me a rating and a review as well. I very much appreciate that. If you're listening to this on Stitcher, hello. Thank you for listening to this on Stitcher. We're still pretty new over there, so I appreciate this. So yeah, that's it, guys. Stay safe. Be happy. Try to stay sane during all this. I know it's a bit hard. I know we've been in our houses for, I don't know what, over a month now, maybe 2 months for some people. But we'll get through this, guys. We'll get through. We just need to stay positive and do what the CDC tells us to do. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast, and I will see you guys next week. Go watch some movies, I guess. That has a different connotation now because we're all stuck at home. So, but yeah, enjoy, guys. Be safe, and I'll see you guys next week.